early assessment is the key. And if we can find out the problems early on, then we're going to be able to give the student the resources they need to be successful.
Every student brings potential. Our job is to unlock it. And that starts with seeing the whole student, not just their scores. Welcome to the Lippincott Spark, Illuminating Nursing Education podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Drees. Join us as we ignite your passion for nursing education and leadership. We'll explore the latest trends, hear from expert nurses, and provide tools to keep you inspired. Let's dive into today's episode and continue your professional development journey together. Hello, I'm super excited to engage in a powerful conversation about student success and why it must begin before students even step into their first nursing class. In today's episode, we'll explore how early intervention, data tracking, and proactive planning can transform student outcomes and increase retention. I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest, Karen Sherrill. Karen is a nationally recognized nurse educator, test item writing expert, and leader in faculty development. With decades of experience in nursing education, she's deeply passionate about building dynamic, student-centered learning environments that truly empower future nurses. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah. So are you ready to spark some innovative ideas?
Absolutely. Let's get rolling.
Let's start off with, if you could tell us a little bit about your journey in nursing education and really what drives your passion for student success.
You know, my history in nursing education, I spent over 30 years in the community college system in the Phoenix metropolitan area. And the types of students that we attracted were frequently English language learners, oftentimes from very diverse backgrounds. Many times the students were later entering their careers. They were later coming into nursing as an option and identifying the fact that I've always wanted to be a nurse. I've raised my family. I'm now independent from my horrible marriage, whatever the case was, and they entered nursing school at a later age. So it was an older population of students. But we also had students that worked full time in addition to going to nursing school. So there were a lot of challenges. There were a lot of challenges with these students and their ability to be successful, sometimes because they didn't have the tools that they need, or sometimes they didn't know how to use the tools that they had, or maybe they just needed access to additional resources. So that really made a difference in our ability to make a difference in their ability to be able to succeed when we really honed in on the individual and how it was we could better serve them to be successful.
You know, I've heard you say that student success begins before nursing school. So what do you mean by that? And why is that so critical?
It really dovetails off what I was just talking about in the fact that when I had a group of students coming to my classroom, they all had different needs and different concerns. You know, I might have a student who is secretly living out of their car in the parking lot, or I may have a student who maybe had a K-12 education in a substandard school and never really acquired the skills they needed to have adequate levels of reading comprehension or math skills. So it really was the need for us to go ahead and how can we strengthen these students before they even get into the heavy nursing curriculum? How can we service these foundational needs that they could be lacking so that they are better able to comprehend and apply the information they're learning in nursing school? So targeting those students at an earlier point in time really proved to be far more successful than waiting till they were failing and trying to fix them at that point in time.
As you mentioned, there's so many non-academic factors that significantly influence a student's ability to be able to persist in the curriculum. And, you know, whether it is the work schedules, they're working 40 hours, or even that test anxiety or limited study skills, their time management, right? Their level of family and peer support. And I think that the key to supporting student success, like you said, really lies in identifying those barriers early and implementing kind of a more personalized and holistic approach, and one that is able to emphasize accountability, the empowerment, both academic and student support. And in my previous role as a dean, I think of the pathway that we launched. It was called Guided Pathways, which was a student success navigator. You have your academic advisors that help them navigate their courses and prereqs. And then you had your retention coaches. And just exactly what you said is having someone be able to identify those students on the front end and create kind of personalized success plans that connect them with community resources if they need it, campus resources, try to overcome those like barriers so they can progress and help them on if they get into probation, right? Suspension, keep them on track. So definitely a great model. There's some great models out there. So you touched on some great points. Is there anything else that we could do or that you've heard once students apply to nursing school? Is there anything else that we can do as nurse educators to identify what those key barriers might be, the ones that we just mentioned?
There's a lot of things that we can do. And I think pinpointing each individual person's weaknesses prior to entry into the program is very beneficial. Most programs out there have some sort of requirements to get into the nursing program. And some schools have very stringent regulations. Some have very flexed. And I'm sure there are programs that have no prerequisites. But the school I was at had the philosophy that everybody can be what they want to be in this world. So we very much supported minimum entry requirements. Our students had to take an entrance exam with minimal competency, and that was their only requirement to get into the nursing program. There were not GPA requirements and other things. So as a result of that, we had students, of course, that came in with all different levels of ability. And it was wonderful. At least when we had that prerequisite exam, we took that information and we could already start to identify this student scored lower on math skills, or this student scored lower on clinical judgment or on, reading comprehension. What can we be doing before the nursing program in order to strengthen that within this individual student? I love the fact that your program had so much support in all these ancillary pieces, having people to provide the skills. But a lot of schools are out there and they're expecting the faculty to service the students and to be those success coaches and the navigators. And that's really challenging to add that in addition to managing a classroom and potentially taking your students to clinical and sim lab and all the other things that faculty have to do. So it's important for us to try to identify those things early on and to get those parts and pieces in place by having a algorithm, a plan in place that helps to route those students and having them work maybe independently on some of those with some guided direction versus having them work formally with somebody who's hired into that position. Whatever the piece is, early assessment is the key. And if we can find out the problems early on, then we're going to be able to give the student the resources they need to be successful.
Yeah. I love that. Set them up for success, right? Like you said, even before they enter into nursing school. Let's talk a little bit about how we define and recognize success in our students. So as we rethink success, what leads to success besides those test scores? What should faculty and programs really be looking for? And how do you do that? Where do you start?
So much of what we do is based upon the test. Students will, in fact, determine their worth based upon their ability to pass the test. And test-taking strategies is one very small piece of making a successful nurse. We've got students, like I said, they might have some sort of learning disability and not even recognize it, never been told. Or maybe they've had hints of it their entire life because they've not been overly successful in school and just figured, oh, well, I'm stupid, I'm not a good student. And they label themselves and they lose that self-confidence. So thinking about ways in which to target those students, give them the tools that they need is just so critically important. What can we provide to them? And I can think of a variety of ways in which to do that. So, for example, thinking about ways to maybe access into resources that are already available on campus. What are some things we can do if we identify some of our students that maybe consistently have issues with time management. Let's hold some sessions. Let's have some video recordings. Let's have some virtual workshops on time management skills and market those to students. So it's not necessarily something that is carved out of my teaching time, but it's a resource I'm providing to students. And I don't even have to spend time doing anything with it other than coordinating it with my counseling department on campus or my career center on campus to come in and give that virtual talk to students. Working through the Student Nurses Association, I always found was a great avenue to make this happen, because student nurses in their group are always looking for things to do, and sponsoring these kind of workshops that have student success strategies can be very beneficial in those cases.
That's great with the time management. And I think of those resources to help them even obtain childcare, or you said food or housing. A lot of them are living out of their cars. I was standing in the hallway one day. One of the students, I just greeted everyone as they came into the classroom. And one of the students, he didn't look so hot. It just didn't look right. And I said, "Good morning. How you doing?" And his eyes got really big and shook his head no, like this. And I said, "Would you like to talk for a minute?" He kind of nodded. So I brought him into my office and I said, "How are you doing? Is there anything I can help you with?" And he said, I don't feel good. I'm sick. I don't know what to do." And I said, "Oh, well, we have a health department over here. We can get you set up with the nurse." And he said, "I've never made a doctor's appointment for myself before. That was my mom's job. Like,
Wow.
I'm a freshman. I don't even know where do I go for healthcare? Like, how do I make an appointment? I don't even know the phone number." So it just really hit me hard. Like, wow, some of the basic things you think, well, students will be able to find resources and access, but how do they do that? So I walked him down to the health nurse and got him all set up. And then the following week, he walked down the hall, and I smiled and nodded to everyone and said, "Good morning." And he looked at me and he just gave me the look like, "I'm good." Like, "Thank you so much." Like, yeah, good. And, because you don't want to draw attention. The dean is, helping him out with anything personal.
That's right. So, that's not cool.
Yeah, that's not cool when his friends are standing by him. But he gave me the look, which really made me happy. Like, faculty, it falls on a lot of the faculty as far as being observant and noticing and being present and really having that great situational awareness that you are also kind of that key person in the classroom to be able to identify maybe a problem and to lead them to the resources that they need. So
absolutely. And, some interesting ways that I found to do that, because the time that you really want to get in touch with your students oftentimes is outside of the classroom hours. But asking a student to come to your office to meet, it can be awkward and uncomfortable.
It can.
But what I found is that if I got to the classroom 15 to 20 minutes early before class every day, and I would just be fumbling around at the top, being on the computer, setting up my PowerPoint, whatever it is I needed to do to prepare the class, it also gave me insight into what was going on with students, because that's when the chatter is happening. That's when you can hear the students saying, "Oh my gosh, my grandma died last night, but I had to come to class today." Things like that. And it gives you the opportunity to kind of really target in on what's going on with your students so that you can support them on a one-on-one basis. That I think it's so critically important that we find that student for where they're at and meet their needs holistically. Not only is it their academic needs, but it's also their emotional needs. And sending that student a little note after class, an email that just says, "You look like you're stressed today. I'm here if you'd like to talk," or whatever it is, so that student feels better supported is so important in building that bond and confidence.
And I think of even the other classes they're taking, whether it's nursing or arts and science classes, there's a lot of things going on in their lives. And I think being able to be observant, you can really hone in on exactly what they need. So, which brings me to kind of having that mindset from reactive to proactive as well. So that's a great strategy. So I think once you understand success, what that truly means, I think the next step is really building the right support system. So let's talk a little bit about how we can set students up for success from day one. And when those plans are in place, right? You've got the plans in place. We've identified those barriers. We've got, resources coming their way. Somehow we have to track the progress, right? How do you track the progress and support those students more effectively? So how can data tracking help a program? What kind of student data should be collected and analyzed?
So I think about times over the years that I've implemented success strategies. And, we kind of went the full gamut over the years that I was teaching, where, again, I was the only faculty that was really providing student success opportunities for students, to the point where we had full-time people reassigned simply for student success and target challenging students. But one thing that was consistent through all of those processes was the power of data. And some of the data collection was hard data, and some of it is what I consider soft data. So I'll talk first about the soft data. One of the things I started doing years and years and years ago was I had a simple Q&A type form that I had students complete on the first day of class. And I just prefaced it by saying, the time that I have with you in this class is very limited, and I want to get to know you as an individual so I can help you be more successful. Therefore, I'm asking you to complete this form, these questions, so that I have the information I need in order to better target what your needs are. This is information that's strictly between you and me. Nobody else is going to see it. I welcome you to share as much or as little that you're comfortable with, but know that my intentions are purely for your success. And I would give students 15, 20 minutes in class to complete that because I felt it was that important. But what that provided me was a whole list of background information from day one of class. I could quickly see the people that had, 7 children and no daycare, or the students that were working full-time jobs or full-time plus jobs outside of nursing school. I could quickly see the students that had those identifiers and the concerns about the potential of not being successful. It also helped me later on when I would have a student maybe that failed a test or two. I could pull that out and say, okay, are there any contributing factors that are leading to what I'm seeing here? But it helped me in the assessment of the student and where they were at. When you talk about the hard data, I always found it was very helpful to start with the hard data that's acquired before the nursing program, such as your entry exams. Looking at those numbers, again, very quickly shows you lower performing students. But I would also track that student with their other hard data scores that were on standardized material. Now, certainly you can track final exam scores in each of the course, or you can look at different things. But even in just looking at standardized exams, you can see how students' performance varies greatly from one semester to the next. And the trends of this material can be so beneficial, I think, in targeting students that are less likely to be successful. One of the things that we did a few years ago in my program is we developed a tool. We researched the data nationally as far as what are the greatest risk factors for students not being successful in nursing school. And we started to pull data from our databases and we collected, in fact, we turned it into an app. We found a company that provided it as an app, and we collected this data and used it as a tracking tool that we could share with our success team in order to target students that were lower performing. But it really was beneficial because it opens up a whole new vision of things that you don't see. If you're simply looking at students as they come to class each week or each day and they're on time and they're sitting attentively and they fail your test, if that's your only indicator, you're not even beginning to see what else is happening.
Do you have an example of where tracking trends led to a positive outcome for students or a cohort that you've seen this really work? And I love the app too. That's pretty cool.
One of the things that I felt was really important because, I put a lot of hard data information on our exit scores. And our students at the end of each semester took an exit exam. Oftentimes, when we were given that information and we got our cumulative exit score for our cohort of students, most faculty will look at that and let's say, oh, look, our students didn't perform well in basic care and comfort. We need to really beef that up next semester and make it better. Well, that is certainly one way to look at the data. But if you want to strengthen students and strengthen a cohort, you need to look at the performance of the students that are coming to you the next semester. So I would retrieve exit scores from the students before I got them into class so I could see their areas of weakness as a cohort. And I would strengthen my class when they were in it based upon their weaknesses. And I think that's important to strengthening the students as they move forward. Those assessments are not intended for us to strengthen our class and our curriculum every semester and grow it and hone it. It's intended for us to strengthen the students as they move through. So you need to really look at what data is more important. Is it important for me to look at this semester's my data? Or is it more important for me to look at previous semester's data for the students that are coming forward into my class? And I feel that better supports student success doing it that way.
With all this information, it's very clear that faculty are at the heart of student success. So let's chat a little bit about how they can lead the way. What role do faculty play in creating a culture of early and ongoing support?
Well, I think it's important for faculty to not only support the class, the group as a whole, but you really need to target individual students. And again, building the relationship with a student that is professional and very supportive can make all the difference in the world. Like I said, from the very beginning of the semester, I would start targeting students and support them maybe just through simple things like a student that's been exceptionally quiet in class and they actually speak out for the first time. And for an introverted student, that took a lot for that student to do it. And I wanted them to feel recognized. So I would either drop them a little handwritten note, I would send them an email after class and just tell them how much I appreciated their participation. Well, that helps to boost their confidence. And we know that someone who is more confident is going to be more successful. And so it's just so important that we meet each student where they're at. One recent study that I had read that was published in the Journal of Professional Nursing, and it looked at the process of self-efficacy, which is, of course, the belief that you have the ability to succeed. And it was extremely well supported that perceived faculty support was one of the most significant positive correlations in student success. So I think it's critically important that our students know that we believe in them. We don't want to be cutting them down and slapping their hands. Look, you failed another test. Look, you've got to study harder. You've got to work harder. They don't know how to study harder. Let's break that down into bite-sized pieces and teach them how to study. They may have never done that their entire educational career, because what happened prior to nursing school, we don't know what the educational system was for them or what the dynamics were in the school that they learned how to be a student in. It may have very negative connotations. So how do we teach that student to be successful based upon what their individual needs are? How do we support them through that process?
What advice would you give to nurse educators who want to implement these strategies, but they feel overwhelmed? We have turnover, right? We have new nurse educators that are coming from practice and they're amazing clinicians, but novice nurse educators, and they're very overwhelmed. Where do you start? How can we implement these strategies when we know they feel that they're drowning at times?
Certainly, I think in the first few years of being a novice educator, you could only have the time and energy to focus on your content. And although I would love to say that's not the case, I think that's the reality of education. You're focused simply on getting your content out there, being accurate in what you're doing in the classroom. And it takes time and evolution to get to the next point. But when you start to focus on your student success strategies, you want to start with your own classroom first. What can I do to help build the bond so students provide trust? Giving very clear expectations from the start that are reasonable. Let students know that if you expect them to prepare something before they come to class, let them know why it's important. Whatever that preparation material is, make sure you bring that to the classroom so they see value in the preparation. They need to know that that's the reason why they're doing it is valuable, not just additional busy work that needs to take place. So tackle your own classroom, make connection with your students, start to identify and assess where their needs are. The next thing you want to think about is, how do I spread this to more of a program-wide approach? What can I do to gain support from my peers and my leadership? Are there opportunities for us to implement some success people that will help to track students and help facilitate student success? Or if you can't get the hiring within your department, how can I access other campus resources? Can I start a partnership with our counseling department? Can I start a partnership with our learning resource lab? What can I do? What's available out there where I can start some of these pieces? And then start to team up with, like I said, the Student Nurse Association. Start to get student buy-in from how can I include the students along this journey? What can I do in order to put the parts and pieces in place and provide students with what they need?
Karen, this has been such a rich conversation, lots of innovative strategies. And before we wrap up, I'd love to hear one final spark of wisdom from you. So what key takeaway would you like to leave our listeners, something that they can carry forward into their teaching practice?
Well, what I wanted to share was actually a story that I had. And I can remember very distinctly having a student come into my office who was not successful in my course. And as I am failing the student and completing all the paperwork to exit them from the program, I couldn't help but walk out that day and think, could it be that that student failed because I did not do my job well enough? Could it be that student could have been successful had I written better test items, had I presented the material, had I targeted them earlier in the semester and given them the skills they needed for success? Well, when you think about the ripple effect of that, especially in the population of the students that I had, was this one person has now failed out of nursing school. That may be the first potential college graduate of that entire family line ever. This person may be the parent of some kids that are impressionable that may or may not go to college. And since mom or dad just failed out of college, then apparently I can't be a college student either. So if you think of that ripple effect, it really is enormous. So the things that you can do to help students succeed has to be given 100% effort. You need to give it your very, very best in order to make sure that each individual person is being successful. And it's more than just a test score. It's about how do I holistically care for that student in order for them to be successful.
Wow. Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your experience, your expertise, all of the passion that you have for nursing education. Your insights really remind us that student success isn't about just, like you said, passing the exams. It's about laying the groundwork for lifelong learning, resilience, and compassionate care. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, keep sparking hope, support, and success for every student who walks through your doors. Thanks again, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Lippincott Spark Illuminating Nursing Education podcast. Enjoy this episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a 5-star review. For more information, click on the link below to learn more about Lippincott Nursing products and services. Until next time, keep leading, learning, and making a difference in nursing education.